Thanks everyone for joining us today. Hope you're staying healthy. Hope you're staying safe wherever you are in the world. Today I have Vinod with me. He's one of our senior protocol engineers and has presented a few times on Tech Tuesdays going through some of the more advanced protocol and environment and node configurations. He'll touch on a few of those features today, but what we really want to do today is kind of have something of an open house and really encourage questions and participation and interaction. And we're going to be doing more talking today versus showing. And we really want to distill some of the enterprise grade infrastructure that you just get out of the box on Kaleido. And then we'll touch on some of the more advanced features, some of the integration, some of the network management and user management features that we have as well when you reach that journey, that stage of your journey. So I'm going to share a few slides. We're going to focus pretty heavily on the enterprise grade slide. We'll dive into the product, show some documentation, some pertinent resources, and then we'll have Vinod show you some of the cool things you can do with your environment, with your nodes, and we'll look at a few of the new features that we've added into Kaleido as well. So at a very high level, Kaleido, built for modern business networks. So we are industry use case agnostic. We have plenty of proof of that with a wide array of different verticals, different businesses, different industries running in production on Kaleido. For those of you that have joined in the past, you'll know that one of our core tenets is making blockchain not only enterprise grade, but also radically simple. So within the console, but also with our APIs, whether you're managing your resources, whether you're speaking or speaking to the smart contract, developing your application. And then the last one is built for the enterprise. And like I said, we'll focus on that today. Our idea is to really flatten the curve for you, make it easy to adapt and adopt this technology, whether it's Ethereum, whether it's Corda, have the tooling, have the shared infrastructure to decentralize your network, very easily perform these rolling upgrades, get very quickly into a pilot phase, and then have that runtime, have that infrastructure to actually deploy this in a production capacity. We've touched on this many times in the past, but this is really important when we're focusing on, through the lens of the enterprise today. The actual blockchain is incredibly important. That's our source of truth. That's our indelible trust anchor. But when we actually sort of broaden our perspective, we realize that the blockchain might only be 5, 10, 15% of the overall stack. And we start needing answers for a lot of the different features that are required in a full stack solution. And these are all features that Kaleido either gives you out of the box or as pluggable or embeddable features through our marketplace. And we start needing answers around data, for example. How are we going to integrate our existing databases? How are we going to securely keep, pertinent, sensitive data off the chain, but then very easily reference it on the blockchain? And then, for example, how are we going to securely transfer this data? So we have a handful of services that make it very easy to integrate existing data storage utilities, but also have the infrastructure on Kaleido to securely transport that private sensitive data to other members inside of your business network. This is our document exchange service. We've looked at this many times in the past, but it's a really critical service for a lot of use cases. This could be supply chain, this could be healthcare provider networks, pharmaceutical trials, real estate, you name it. So Kaleido is going to give you this Kafka infrastructure. We're going to provide you that secure, asymmetric cryptography and reliable transport for this sensitive data. Moving higher, we're going to give you a lot of different node clients, Quorum, Geth, Hyperledger Besu, or Corda OS. And these are going to accommodate, different consensus algorithms and different levels of privacy. One critical thing that we see that's required by, all enterprises and all businesses is the ability to consume pertinent state changes on your blockchain network in real time. So we've developed and integrated a very easy service that we call Kaleido Event Streams that allow you to subscribe to the methods and the state changes that you actually care about inside of your business network. So think about a marketplace, right? If someone makes something for sale, right, you would like to have a reliable notification to your application, to your back office system, that that asset is now available for purchase or for bidding. And so the event streams can be really, really powerful in a lot of different capacities. So we've done a ton of work, not only at the data layer, but at the actual blockchain and transactional layer. Moving a bit higher, we see the need for a lot of integrations and a lot of connectors, whether these are oracles or whether these are existing identity access management systems. So Kaleido within our marketplace and also within the product as a first-class utility, tons of features on integrating your core back office systems. And then lastly, the more exciting layer, I guess, the application layer, we're actually doing your programming and developing your user-facing app. Kaleido has put a lot of work into not only tokenization, but making it very, very easy to speak to the blockchain. So we've done an abstraction of a lot of the really tricky things that exist in Ethereum and a lot of the barriers and roadblocks that can arise. And you'll see this when Vinod kind of demos our next generation of the Kaleido Easy button in our in-console Swagger interface. Super quick snapshot of the different clients. I mentioned that we are truly built for modern business networks and industry use case agnostic. So you can see here that this is spanning retail, entertainment, financial institutions, energy majors, etc. But what we're really here for today is to touch on a lot of the things that are sort of hiding in the background that you get for free and that just make Kaleido not only a wonderful experience, but also tick off a lot of the check boxes that your risk compliance officer is going to require. So the first one, ISO certification. So Kaleido is ISO 27001, 17, and 18 certified. And these are the utmost levels of security auditing, and we're in the process of undergoing a SOC 2 audit as well. So in terms of that, security certification, you get that out of the box on Kaleido. So this is really, really critical. One of the only blockchain as a service providers in the industry to actually have that certification. The second one is secure key management. And this could be its own webinar, and it has been in the past actually on different key custody techniques and sort of the dude, where is my key question. But Kaleido supports a wide variety of key management techniques. Obviously, you can go with the classic route and do externally managed keys, create sort of a classic Web3 architecture, and just do basic externally signed transactions. But with our Kaleido Easy button, our REST API gateway, we've integrated a lot of additional key management techniques. So we have Kaleido managed wallets that can also be encrypted with master keys. We have accounts that you can manage on your node, either through the Kaleido console or through the JavaScript console, and you can manage your own seed phrases and your own encryption on those. But we also support cloud HSM signing, and this is a really, really critical one when we think about the enterprise. So having the ability to take your existing cloud infrastructure, your own organizational AWS or Microsoft Azure account, and keep your private Ethereum keys inside one of those HSM providers in that cloud. So this is ensuring that no one is ever going to be able to access that key. If it attempts to be accessed, it's going to actually be destroyed. And this gives you the utmost levels of assurances on the integrity and on the custody of that key. In addition to those two cloud providers, kind of the classic managed cloud provider services on Kaleido, we also support HashiCorp server with a signing extension, meaning you can take that piece of software and you can run it in any private cloud account or even in your on-premise data center. So this wide, flexible array of different signing techniques and very, very easy integration and support for cloud HSMs. We've done, like I said, we've gone ad nauseum on key signing and on transaction signing and key management, and there are Tech Tuesdays that have been recorded that you can grab off of our YouTube channel if you want to look at those in more detail. We're not going to focus on that anymore today, but I think it's really, really important to just touch on that we have all of the different options available for you in Kaleido. All right, speeding up and moving along, enterprise identity. So this is something that you don't really get out of the box with classic Ethereum. We've developed a technique and a service on Kaleido to actually underpin your organizational identity with classic PKI infrastructure, X509 digital certificates, and then you can start binding those trust proofs to actual on-chain infrastructure. You can bind them to Ethereum accounts. You can bind them to different services that exist inside of Kaleido, our document exchange service and our app-to-app messaging. And what you can do is you can create this logical tree, this logical hierarchy, where you have an organizational certificate, you have that PEM encoded X509, and underneath it, you can start having key value pairs. So you can have, the Ethereum addresses of your end users, and you can have this one-to-one unequivocal binding of those users with your organization. Really, really important construct, PKI and X509, of course. We have, very, very strong levels of support on Kaleido. We give support to every customer, no matter what tier you're on, including our free starter tier. But for enterprise clients and for production infrastructure, we do offer select and premium support tiers where you can get 24/7 support and guaranteed 1-hour response times. Moving across, kind of going hand in hand with that support, we have a very robust team in terms of SMEs and blockchain expertise. So obviously Vinod, one of those, works very, very closely with the open source communities, Quorum, Geth, Hyperledger Besu, Corda, et cetera. And we have the internal expertise to help you debug and sort of remedy some of those edge use cases. Cross-cloud and hybrid, this is a really, really critical one. There's not a one size that fits all in any industry or in any network. So not only do we support multiple clouds, AWS and Azure, but we now sort of in the Gen 3 architecture of Kaleido can very, very easily accommodate and support what we call Kaleido private stack. So on-premise deployments or having a self-managed node in your own private cloud infrastructure. So this could be GCP, this could be actually in your own Azure or AWS account if you wanted. It could be on IBM Cloud, or it could be in that on-prem server, wherever you need to manage that node for security or compliance purposes. Two of the others, HA and DR, these are things that sometimes we sort of just run through as buzzwords, but it's really worth spending some time on sort of the value of high availability and disaster recovery. So all of the preemptive auto scaling, all of that underlying networking and those Kubernetes cloud infrastructure, you get that for free on Kaleido. So every single region that you're choosing on AWS or Azure, and we'll look at these in a second, those are underpinned by 3 different data centers. So you're going to get, if there even is the outage of an entire data center, you're getting this replicated file system technology. You're going to get these VMs that are going to be automatically deployed to additional data centers, and you're going to be able to have continued availability to your nodes and to your infrastructure. So these are huge when you're sort of again ticking off the compliance boxes for a vendor or for a tech provider, and these are available again for you for free regardless of plan out of the box on Kaleido. Business continuity, a lot of times we get asked this question of, Kaleido, you're a startup, what happens if you go away? Do I lose my blockchain infrastructure? Do I lose my ledger? Do I lose all those transactions? And the answer is no. We've done a lot of work, not only with the DR and these automated snapshot backups, but we also give you the ability to integrate your node and your blockchain with your existing storage providers. So this could be an AWS S3 bucket, or this could be an Azure Blob container. And what you can do is you can take a backup of the entirety of your node, i.e. your whole blockchain. So you're not only going to get the level DB and all of the world state and all the transactions, but you're also going to get those critical Ethereum signing keys and consensus signing keys as well. So you can actually recreate your private Kaleido infrastructure after the fact. We offer best of breed open source technologies, Geth, Quorum, Hyperledger Besu, constantly committing upstream to those repositories. A bunch of different enterprise integrations. We'll touch on these in a bit more detail when we actually go ahead and create an environment and create a node. And then, as I mentioned, sort of support for hybrid deployments with Kaleido private stack. So being able to, with full connectivity back to managed resources and infrastructure, run a node in your own private cloud account or your own on-premise data center. Okay, so those are all the enterprise features. We'll actually dive into the product now. But just the last thing before we open up the console and maybe look at a few more exciting things, just want everyone to know that we are standard software as a service. So there are, pay-as-you-go packages, starter, team, business, and enterprise. We're essentially just paying the freight for your runtime, for your resources, mainly your nodes, but also some ancillary costs for storage and other services. But we also work closely with companies of all sizes and try to meet you at the current stage of the journey that you're on. So we can create custom packages, time boxed for 3 months, 6 months, maybe even a year, to give you sort of the right mix of access to those resources that you're going to need. We can also, potentially help with, systems integration and delivery of projects. Well, I'll leave my email and we can take that offline. But just want everyone to be aware that we do have a wide mix of packages available on Kaleido. Okay, so now without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into the product. We'll go ahead and create a network. We'll look at sort of some of the network architecture, and then we'll look at some of the management features, some of the integrations, and then I'll turn it over to Vinod to dig a bit more deeply into the actual blockchain piece, I suppose. Okay, so I have an account. I'm going to go ahead and log in. I shouldn't have any resources that exist inside of here. And the first thing we would do is we would create a business network or a consortium in Kaleido. So I'll just create one called testnet, click next. And now what I can do is I can choose a home region. I'm going to whitelist a cloud provider for my network. So based on, maybe where my existing cloud infrastructure is or the requirements of the network, I can choose a certain cloud provider and appropriate region. We're based in Raleigh, North Carolina, so I'll just go ahead and choose the East Coast of AWS. But one great thing on Kaleido, what we do is we don't limit you to a single cloud or a single region. So you can now start turning this business network, this consortium, into either a multi-region business network or even a cross-cloud multi-region business network. And we can choose to whitelist these cloud providers and regions currently, or we can even do it after the fact once we've created our network. So I'll go ahead and whitelist Azure in the US and then show you how easy it is to add those after the fact. So here's the namespace for the business network, nothing exciting. I'm provisioned the first membership inside of the network, alpha organization, and now I can choose to build out the composition in a couple of different ways. One great technique for early stage projects, sort of the lightweight sandbox or POC, where you want to mock out how your network might look in the future, is to create multiple memberships. And so you can go ahead and just click add member to my org, and you could create, for example, organization 123. Okay, this could be a bank, this could be, a vendor, anyone that's inside of your business network. And when you go to create node and you go to create security credentials and different resources, you can bind these memberships to those resources. So you can have this logical compartmentalization of different resources associated with different memberships. So that's one approach. You could also use this construct if you wanted to proxy operate resources on behalf of end users. Maybe they kind of want some skin in the game in the business network, but they don't want to be, a fully fledged admin and have to operate these resources. So that's also a technique. The more exciting technique, and kind of evoking the true ethos of blockchain, is to decentralize your network. So this is an experience that we'll be adding to the V2 console on Kaleido very, very soon. Currently, you're going to need to use the Kaleido Classic console to do this, but it's very, very simple to do. And what you do as the founder of the business network, you're going to extend an invitation to an external participant. So you're going to provide them with autonomous access into your business network. So we could call this, maybe I want to extend an invitation to organization XYZ, admin@email.com. And now, as the founder or the initiator of this business network, you have a lot of power, and you can choose to allocate or extend all of the root admin permissions that you have, or you can temper some of the privileges that this newly onboarded member has. And these are really, really important to think about. There's a couple in here that they're all self-explanatory, but there's a couple that are really, really worth drawing attention to. The first is creating nodes as signers, meaning they're going to actually participate in the consensus algorithm. There may be a circumstance where someone just might want a node to, perform queries or do audits. So maybe they don't actually need to be a signing node. The second one, a very important privilege, the ability to manage environments. This is create and upgrade environments. And in Kaleido, every environment is its own isolated firewalled blockchain. So environments are a very, very important construct. Speeding along, this one should be self-explanatory, but do you want this new member to also be able to issue invitations? Do you want them to be able to create multiple memberships? The action I just showed you, and do you want them to be able to manage smart contracts? So we've looked at sort of the smart contract management feature in the past, but this is a construct where you have shared line of sight into the business logic that's being executed across your consortium inside of your environments. So this is also a very, very important feature. So based on the needs and the governance of your consortium, choose to extend or rescind one or all of these permissions here. So that's the decentralization approach. And now we'll go ahead and hop back and we'll look at some of the user management and organizational management approaches. So here's my business network, my consortium testnet that I just created. I have no environments inside of it. And now I can go ahead and I can choose to add additional regions using the settings. I can choose to change the name, or I can choose to delete the network. What we're going to focus on, though, is the actual organizational management feature. And there's two things I want to draw your attention to. The first is this construct we have called co-administrators. So there may be scenarios where you want to have one common account, you want to have one common set of infrastructure, but you want to very easily be able to extend access to that infrastructure to different users with their own different accounts and their own different security management features and their own different passwords, but have this single namespace, this single sandbox, this single playground, single blockchain network where everyone can collaborate and co-administer. And so we have this manage users feature right here. And this is very, very easy to use. The only requirement is that any user that receives an invitation is going to need to have their own corresponding Kaleido account. So using this feature right here, we can just go ahead and click add user. I can extend an invitation. Actually, this isn't an invitation. This is an admin action. So I have an account, nick123456 at mailinator.com. I can go ahead and add that user right there. And now if I go ahead and log into this account, I'll be able to switch the context of my organization to be part of this alpha organization right here. And by doing so, I'll be able to manage that network. I'll be able to create environments if I wanted. I'll be able to create nodes, manage memberships, etc. So again, very, very useful construct for co-administration of a network and very, very easy collaboration. So just go ahead and switch to this other account that we have right here. Hopefully I didn't mistype it. So this is the Bravo organization. I've been added, and now I can go ahead and hop into the Alpha organization, and I see the existence of that test net that we just created. I could hop into here and I could start doing more interesting things. So let me go ahead and log out. I'll go back into the original account that we have here, and we'll look at two more different constructs before I turn it over to Vinod. So the next new thing that we've added in V2 of Kaleido is this concept of a sub-organization. And this is really useful when you want to have, a single authority that has control, over a wide array of domains. Useful if you want to roll up billing into a single account, if you want to do, account and network management on behalf of an entity and then transfer the ownership of that organization. Pretty much just a management feature right here. So very, very easy to create a sub-org. It'll live as a child beneath your root organization. So we see here that I've actually created one. I have an example sub-org, which is a child of my alpha organization. And what I can do is I can click on this organization. I'm now acting under the context of this example sub-org. I can create a network, I can create nodes, I can issue transactions. And once I harden this infrastructure, I would have the ability to actually transfer the ownership of this organization to another individual. So this is a useful construct if you're, for example, an SI, right? And you're doing solutions delivery, you're doing application architecture on behalf of a client. You can add them as a co-administrator to the sub-organization. And like I said, once all of the runtimes, once all of the code has been hardened in that stack, you can actually transfer the ownership and allow them to now have unilateral or autonomous control. And you can also be retained as a co-administrator, or you can even be off-boarded. So really, really, useful technique for kind of the early or intermittent stages of a project. Okay, so the last thing I want to do, and again, please throw questions into the Q&A or the chat if there are anything that comes to the surface here. So the last thing I want to do, I'm going to switch the context right here back to the alpha organization. We have our test network, and I'm just going to go ahead and create a super quick environment, and we'll look at a few of those cloud integrations that are available. So I'll just call this dev number 1. We're going to go cloud only. Again, if you do want to learn more about Kaleido Private Stack, you can very, very easily contact us. We can discuss that in more detail. I'll just go with Geth and proof of authority. Vinod's going to touch on some of this other stuff down the road here. And then I'm just going to create a node. So we'll call this node number 1. And we see that we have the ability to integrate a lot of those cloud features that I was talking about. Now, these are going to be services that are not controlled and not managed by Kaleido, but these are going to be services in your own private organizational cloud account. So using AWS KMS or Azure Key Vault for heightened encryption of the node and the file system, adding in AWS S3 or Azure Blob containers for those business continuity purposes and to do those snapshot backups. Integrating with your, AWS CloudWatch service, for example, so that you can have, heightened insight into the logs and what's happening on Kaleido. And then lastly, the ability to do private networking or integrate your existing IAM provider. One final thing before I turn it over, we do have different t-shirt sizes, and these are not binary choices. So if you do anticipate a sudden surge in your workflow or your throughput, sort of your transaction submission, you can very, very easily, within the console or via our APIs, you can automate the resizing of your node. So if you're not, issuing a lot of transactions, you're probably good with a small node. If you do anticipate a surge, in your throughput in the workload, you can time that and issue an API call, a cron job, update your node to a medium or a large size, and then you can downgrade it once that surge stops. Happy to talk more about node sizes and the limitations and restrictions that come with those as well. So that's it for me. That was more talking than I anticipated doing. Apologies, but I will stop sharing now, and we'll turn it over to Vinod for some more actual blockchain pieces here. So thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. And please feel free to stop me if you have any questions along the way. So my plan today is to create an environment with some of the advanced features that Nick was talking about. Mainly the ability to configure things like pre-funded accounts or a custom chain ID, custom block period, which are all part of our enterprise feature set for environment creation. And then once we create the environment, I'd like to demonstrate some access control on individual nodes. So for example, how you could limit the API calls that can be made to a node at the Ethereum level. Some of the other things that I want to talk about is how do you configure backups? So Nick talked extensively about disaster recovery, the ability to recreate the chain. If Kaleido goes away, we want to believe and we think we won't go away, but if, for disaster recovery purposes, if you want to take a backup of a node or a service, how do you do that? So let's create an environment. So I'm going to pick Geth POA, which is a proof of authority based consensus on the Geth open source Ethereum client. Now, one of the things you'll see when creating the environment now, if you're on the right plan, is to customize some aspects of your environment. So let's say you want to create chain with a particular chain ID because, say for example, you want well-known chain IDs across your organization for, your development, your staging, and your production environment. So you could create a chain with a custom chain ID. You can also set a particular block period on the blocks that are mined in this environment. Now, there are some safe limits that we set for each type of consensus depending on the algorithm. But the determination as to why you want a lower or higher block period is to do with, how many transactions you want as a throughput, and then how much gas do you want to allocate as limits to each blocks, and so on and so forth. So I leave the block period as the default, but you're able to change this to a higher value. I believe the limits for POA is between 5 and 10 seconds. Maybe we'll just go ahead and create a 10-second block period environment for POA. The next thing you can do is create or designate pre-funded accounts which have Ether balances in the Genesis configuration. So by default, the Kaleido system monitor node has a Ethereum account, and then we designate 1 billion Ether for that account in the Genesis configuration. But obviously for your environment, you may want certain well-known wallet addresses, and you may want to initialize those with Ether during creation. So what I'm going to do here as a demonstration is I've got my MetaMask wallet here. So I'm going to copy the account address of my MetaMask wallet, and I'm going to initialize this particular wallet with an insane amount of Ether, because why not? So the first thing you obviously want to do in a new environment is to create a new node. And you can see here when creating a node, we let you create what is called a backup store. Now, if you were to create a backup store, so we can either do it at node creation time or after the fact. I'm going to create the node first up because the nodes take a little bit of time to come up and form consensus. So let's go ahead and create that, and then we can talk about some of these other aspects while the nodes are coming up. So I'm going to add one more node here. So as these nodes are coming up, you will find in the new console experience the ability to create cloud configurations separately. So what we want to do, so I guess, okay. There you go. So let's create a backup store configuration here. And we want to create it for either, so for a particular membership, because any nodes and services which are part of that membership are then able to use that particular backup configuration. So what I'm going to do here is call this. So I have an AWS backup store in my AWS account. So I'm going to create a AWS backup as the target for this backup configuration. So I'm going to fetch the keys here in a moment. So you need the API key and the API secret as part of your IAM credentials in AWS in order to be able to configure a backup store, because Kaleido needs to be able to upload the stuff to your designated S3 bucket, and that obviously needs access credentials. So let's have started, which indeed they have. And one of the things that is required, as most other configurations for a particular node, is you need to apply the node configuration by resetting, by attaching a runtime to the configuration. So I'm going to attach this to node 1. And this is now applied. And once this is applied, we can then designate, or we can then invoke a on-demand backup on the node. Now, what does the backup operation do? It basically goes and takes all the contents of the node, the things which are important to you, such as all your key materials, all the chain data, which is either part of Ethereum or any other provider that you may be using. And it also grabs all the other contents which is on the node, be it things like your extra accounts which you may have configured on the node. So on Ethereum, you have the ability to configure or set up additional accounts other than the default signing and the consensus account. So you can go ahead and back up all those account credentials. So you will be able to use them if you want to either recreate the node as part of a DR operation, or you want to back up a whole bunch of nodes and then go and replicate the chain elsewhere in your own data center, for example. So since the backup configuration is now attached to this node, I'm going to demonstrate how you would actually invoke a backup operation. Now, in a release of the console that we have upcoming, we're going to add an operation to kick off backups from the console. So currently we have the ability to designate a backup, but that's coming soon. So it's still straightforward to do via the API. It's a call to invoke a backup on a particular node. So I'm going to invoke a put API call. On this node with a /backup at the end. So it says this backup request was accepted. And if I go to the AWS console, and this is the bucket which I had configured. And you can see here that Kaleido uploaded a backup snapshot of the contents of the node to the S3 bucket. It has the environment ID, node ID, and a timestamp of the backup. You're obviously welcome to download this star, examine its contents, and use it as you see fit. So any questions so far? Sorry, I haven't been monitoring the chat, Nick. If there are
I think we're good. Let's
okay.
press forward.
So the next thing I want to demonstrate is how you can set up access control to your nodes. Now, one of the common use cases we hear from our customers is they have environments where they want to designate one of the nodes as something which is accessible by their partners. So for example, it could be a DApp developer or a DApp company that they have a tie-up with. And when they provide access to a node in the environment to such a third party, they want to limit the access by saying, hey, I don't want this person to be able to execute any JSON RPC API. I want them to be able to limit the kind of APIs they execute. I also want them to not be able to attach to the runtime so they have access to the Geth console. So so Kaleido provides a blockchain application firewall policy, which you can create and attach to any nodes. You know, the amount of things you can configure on this firewall is pretty extensive, I'm sorry. So today I will be demonstrating a use case where you can limit the API calls which can be made to a node to a very small subset of API calls. So let's take the example that you, as an enterprise, you have an agreement with certain DApp provider who wants to query the chain. So they want to get the status of the transactions. So they want to get the block heights. So they want to get the transaction receipts to know what the status of any transaction is. So we'll be creating a blockchain application firewall policy, and then we'll attach it to a runtime where we will limit the API calls which can be executed to only a certain subset. So under apps and integration, you will find the ability to configure a blockchain application firewall policy. So first, I'm going to create the policy which says only get JSON RPC calls. And you will see in the blockchain application firewall policy. So initially, by default, the allowed RPC methods here are anything and everything. But we are going to edit this to make sure that we will only allow a certain subset of RPC calls to be executed. There's also a whole bunch of different options that we provide in terms of being able to configure which access tokens can have access to the node and so on and so forth, or being able to configure a course domain which can access the node. So I'll be touching upon only the RPC method configuration today, but I'm sure do reach out to us, and we are happy to talk to you about any of the other capability which is part of the application firewall. So let's go ahead and edit this rule set, which says, get JSON RPC methods. And I'm going to add API call, which is basically the ability to query account balances. So let's maybe start with this, and I can show you a super restrictive policy, and then we can expand on that if we have time. So once you create the policy, we will now go ahead and attach this again to our runtime. So let's attach this to runtime 2. And you will see that for certain configurations, the node, the policy is not yet applied because the node needs to be reset for this policy to be applied, because there are some changes which need to be provisioned on the runtime. So the runtime becomes aware of these policies, which means we need to reload the node in order to be able to apply that configuration. So I'm going to apply this configuration, which basically locks down the access to node 2 to a very, very small subset of API calls. So let's connect an application here. So I'm going to call this a BAF application credential. So what I'm going to do now is execute some JSON RPC API calls, and you will see, we only allow the API calls which have been designated as part of the BAF policy, and everything else is going to be rejected. So let's try to query all the accounts on this node. Let's first make sure that the node is back up. Yes, it is back up and it's showing as active. Okay, so the node is still not yet up, I guess. Okay, so we are able to see logs from the node. So you can see that any attempt to invoke a JSON RPC API returns a method that's a message that says this is unauthorized. Let's go ahead and execute the call which we have allowed, which is ETH underscore get balance. And what I will do here is, because I pre-funded my MetaMask account address, I'm going to query the account balance on this address. So I can say I want the status from the latest block, and you can see it returns the result. We could also try to attach to this runtime the get console, and that also returns unauthorized. So this node is now, pretty heavily locked down, and we only allow access to this node in a certain very defined way. So this is one of the ways in which you can control access to your nodes as well. So I know I pre-funded one of the accounts using MetaMask. So one of the things I would also like to walk you through today is the new Swagger interface, which is embedded. It's very easy to use, really slick. And in order to do that, let's do a fun project of deploying a token contract, and then let's transfer some of our new tokens to this MetaMask address or MetaMask wallet address, which I've got. And then we'll be able to see the status of that token or the balance in MetaMask. We can also then go and see what's basically happening with that token. So under digital assets, we have the ability to create tokens. So I'm going to pick the node's account. It'll be a standard ERC20 token. Obviously, you can do something more fancy. Let's just use vanilla ERC20 token today. And while this is happening, well, I guess I need to wait for the contract address in order to tell MetaMask to get access to this contract's balance and whatnot. So let's wait for this to be deployed, and it's going to take a little bit because we've configured a 10-second block period, if you remember, which means the next confirmed block will be after a minimum of 10 seconds, and that basically dictates how soon this request is going to return a response. Any questions or comments so far?
Okay. I'll just throw something in there too for folks that want more details on sort of blockchain application firewall and maybe how that works in the scope of an actual D app or a mobile app. One of our engineers I think it was about a month ago, he did a very in-depth Tech Tuesday walking you through BAF and showing different, role-based access control against different end users. Essentially a more expanded demo of what Vinod just showed you. But I'd encourage you to go ahead and hop into YouTube and just do a Kaleido BAF search, and you can go ahead and view that Tech Tuesday. It's very illuminating.
Okay, so the contract instance was deployed. So what I'm going to do now is deploy a token instance. So I'm going to create a test token. Maybe that was too much zeros.
Maybe it's too many zeros.
Yeah, I guess so. So I did have the right wallet. Okay, so maybe I need to refresh the screen. Apologies for the Demo God's not cooperating. Now, as a backup, I could also load one of the other environments I had and see whether we have we don't have a token there. So we'll try to deploy one here. Should load faster because we have a smaller block period here. Okay. Okay, so we have a contract address now. So what I will do is tell MetaMask about this new contract address. So let's go and create an access for MetaMask. And I'm going to create a network configuration that basically says, here's how to connect to the current node using a custom RPC. So this is my Kaleido demo MetaMask, and then the RPC URL, the chain ID and everything else is optional. So I can now add a token that says, here's the contract address. So we have the contract address, which was deployed. And it recognizes that the symbol is test, the precision is so on. And so I'm going to add this token. So let's try to transfer some tokens to this wallet so we can see the balance reflected here. And while we are transferring, we'll be able to see the new Swagger in action. So go to the tokens experience. So here's where we'll load up the API. And I guess
if you want the Swagger, you probably have to go to the apps and integrations and API gateway APIs.
There you go. Okay, thanks, Nick. So you will now see, as opposed to, so previously we had this experience where a new tab would load with the Swagger API. So we now have embedded experience in terms of loading the API and for you to be able to try out different operations. So what I'm going to do here is invoke a transfer. And because this is a standard ERC20, so let's say I want to try this out. So I basically designate an amount that needs to be transferred and the recipient. So the amount, let's say it is, and the recipient is the MetaMask wallet address. And you will see the status returning here with the transaction receipt and the transaction hash as well. So this was executed without issues. So if we now go and look at MetaMask, you will see that this wallet has a balance of so-and-so test tokens. I don't know if you had anything to add with respect to the Swagger interface, Nick.
No, it's just a cleaner, more interactive experience. Yeah. It's a great step forward from the original experience that we have, and it also doesn't sort of open up a new window. It keeps you self-contained within the product as well here. One thing to just bear in mind, it's worth reiterating, everything that we show here, inside of the console, inside of the Swagger, this is not how you would build a proper application, right? You would use these APIs and you would program against these endpoints. So this is very, very simple. This is a REST API that you're just talking to. You put a little Swagger client inside of your server application, and then you can do all of these same things that Vinod is demoing here with regards to tokens and with regards to other services as well. Cool. Anything else to show, Vinod, or does that about do it?
I think that's pretty much what I had in mind. So unless we have any specific requests, so I think that's pretty much what I had.
Okay, that's fantastic. So thanks so much for sharing your time in that demo, Vinod. I've added my email into the chat for folks. If you have any technical or commercial topics you'd like to tackle that weren't addressed today, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can also open support tickets inside of the console as well, and you can sort of enumerate the topic that you'd like to discuss. So thanks so much for joining us today.